0420 hours, June 18th, 2026. Fort Dodge, Iowa. 12 agents from FBI hostage rescue team moved in single-file formation through standing corn toward the eastern loading dock of Webster County Cooperative. Temperature, 41 degrees. Wind from the northeast at 14 miles per hour. Light, steady rain. The only illumination came from red-lensed flashlights held low against the ground, visible at 3 feet, invisible at 30. They were going into a grain elevator, into silo number 6. What they expected to find, based on months of thermal imaging drone sweeps, a financial forensics review, and 3 federal warrant applications, was a sealed subgrade chamber beneath a false grain hopper, and 5 American women reported missing from Iowa and southern Minnesota communities over the preceding 12 weeks. Some had been inside that chamber for as many as 87 days. 2 vehicles blocked the only vehicle exit routes from the property. United States Marshal Service tactical personnel held the outer perimeter. An Iowa State Patrol cruiser sat on County Road D38 a quarter mile to the east. In the mobile command vehicle positioned behind a tree break on the facility's north boundary, Special Agent in Charge Thomas Brennan of FBI Omaha monitored a live thermal drone feed circling 200 feet above the silo cluster. The heat signatures inside Silo 6 had not moved in 6 hours. Brennan gave the order. What followed in the next 11 minutes would end one of the more methodically constructed forced confinement operations federal law enforcement in the upper Midwest had investigated in recent memory. Not a scheme built on speed or violence, not on sophisticated technology or encrypted communications, built on paperwork, on a single falsified entry in an agricultural audit ledger, on a decommissioned structures inspection protocol with a gap that no state regulatory body had ever needed to close before because no one had ever tried to use it quite this way. The operation had been running for 7 months without detection. It unraveled because a 34-year-old state co-op auditor named Rachel Mast had been assigned a new district rotation in November of 2025, and because she noticed the wrong number on the wrong line during what should have been a routine harvest cycle review. Webster County Cooperative had operated outside Fort Dodge since 1958. 14 silos, a corn processing facility rated for 4.2 million bushels annually. 312 family farms across Webster, Hamilton, and Boone counties ran grain through it each harvest season. In 67 years of continuous operation, the cooperative had passed every state agricultural inspection on record. Donald Vance, 47, had been assistant manager since 2009. He inherited the post when his father retired. The board transferred it without a formal search process. He coached youth baseball. He served on the Lutheran Church Council. His name appeared in the Fort Dodge Messenger 3 or 4 times per year. Harvest Yields, the co-op annual meeting, a charity auction held every August at the county fairgrounds. He was exactly the kind of man who becomes invisible in a rural community. Present everywhere, noticed nowhere. That visibility, the community standing, the decades of institutional familiarity, the inherited credibility of a father whose name was still respected, was deliberately maintained. Vance understood that the best concealment was not anonymity, it was legitimacy. Silo 6 was the oldest structure on the property. Originally constructed for a seed corn operation, the cooperative absorbed in the late 1980s. The silo was 72 feet tall, with a subgrade chamber below the main hopper floor, a construction feature standard in agricultural facilities from that era, absent in most modern builds. The subgrade chamber had a separate access point, a welded steel bulkhead, accessible only from within the main silo structure, positioned at the base of an interior access shaft that descended through 2 equipment floors. According to cooperative maintenance records, Silo 6 had processed overflow corn as recently as October of 2025, before being taken offline in November and logged as decommissioned for structural repair. The structural repair was never performed. The silo was never returned to service. In all formal cooperative documentation filed after November of 2025, Silo 6 appeared only as a notation, a decommissioned asset, nothing inside, nothing to inspect. That notation was the foundation of everything. Rachel Mast joined the Iowa Department of Agriculture's Grain Warehouse Bureau in 2023, after 6 years in private agricultural accounting. In November of 2025, she was assigned the Webster County District as part of a routine auditor rotation that replaced a veteran inspector who had covered the route for 11 consecutive years. Fresh eyes on a familiar facility. Her first comprehensive audit of Webster County Cooperative covered the most recent 6 harvest cycles, standard examination, inbound and outbound tonnage by silo, power consumption records, maintenance documentation, employee logs. She ran it across the final 2 weeks of November. The discrepancy appeared in the tonnage ledger for Silo 6. 612 tons of inbound corn had been recorded entering Silo 6 between August and October of 2025. Outbound tonnage on the same ledger, 0. The corn went in, nothing came out. The silo had been logged as decommissioned before the product could be transferred or processed. In agricultural accounting, grain doesn't disappear. It either moves to adjacent storage, gets processed and shipped, or it gets documented as destroyed in cases of confirmed spoilage, with corresponding certifications attached to the maintenance file. There was no transfer record in any adjacent silo's ledger, no spoilage documentation, no explanation anywhere in the file. Mast flagged it as a record discrepancy and submitted a physical inspection request through the standard bureau form. Vance responded within 2 business days. Silo 6 was structurally unsafe for entry, required OSHA certification and specific liability waivers before any inspection could proceed, and he would schedule something for the 2nd week of January. She acknowledged the response. Then she pulled the power consumption records, included as a standard component of the Bureau's audit protocol, and cross-referenced them against the maintenance logs for the same facility. Silo 6, listed as decommissioned and uninhabited since the 3rd week of November, was drawing electricity at 340% above its baseline dormant reading. The reading had been at that elevated level since the billing cycle immediately following the decommissioning date. Every invoice since November, the same number. Empty buildings draw almost nothing. Idle, sealed structures draw almost nothing. Silo 6 was drawing enough sustained power to run a climate control system continuously since the week it had been officially logged as decommissioned and taken offline. Mast escalated the file to the Bureau's Compliance Office on December 2nd, 2025. The Compliance Office issued a formal follow-up inspection demand. Vance refused, citing the warrant requirement under state agricultural inspection protocols for non-consented entry into decommissioned or non-operational structures. That requirement had existed in Iowa policy for over a decade, a paperwork bypass designed to reduce the inspection burden on tagged-out assets and avoid forcing inspectors into structurally compromised buildings. It was a reasonable provision. Vance had been aware of it. The Bureau referred the matter to the Iowa Attorney General's office on December 12th. The AG's office notified FBI Omaha 7 days later. FBI Omaha had a threshold problem. A grain elevator with mismatched tonnage records and anomalous power consumption was not, standing alone, sufficient predicate for a federal investigation. The tonnage mismatch could reflect routine bookkeeping error. The power draw could be explained by faulty monitoring equipment, a failed shut-off relay, or hardware left on an active circuit after decommissioning. These were state-level regulatory concerns, not federal criminal matters. Brennan's team queried the National Crime Information Center Missing Persons database, cross-referencing Fort Dodge and the surrounding 4-county region against the preceding 12 months. They were looking to rule out a connection, not to find one. They could not rule it out. The first return came in mid-January. A woman from Des Moines, 26 years old, reported missing by her employer on January 22nd, after she failed to report for 3 consecutive scheduled shifts. No prior missing persons history on file, no documented financial distress, no indication she had left voluntarily. Her vehicle had been found unlocked in a parking structure near her workplace. Keys inside. A second name came back within 10 days. A woman from Cedar Rapids, 23, reported missing by her family on January 29th. Similar profile, no prior history, no obvious precipitating event, no communication after the date of disappearance. By the end of March, federal agents cross-referencing the NCIC data had connected 4 more entries. Ages 22 to 31. Missing from Des Moines, Ames, Cedar Rapids, and Rochester, Minnesota. All reported within a 9-week window, running from mid-January through late March of 2026. No documented social connections between them in any available database. No overlapping employers, schools, residential neighborhoods, or family networks. 5 unconnected women, 9 weeks. A geographic corridor running roughly between Fort Dodge and the Twin Cities. Thermal imaging of Silo 6 showing human-scale heat signatures on every overnight pass since agents had initiated the surveillance operation in January. The FBI formally expanded the investigation to include a federal kidnapping inquiry on April 8, 2026. The power anomaly had been billing on the cooperative's monthly utility account since November of 2025. It was visible in plain numbers on every invoice for 6 consecutive months before anyone with federal authority had reason to look at it. The inspection protocol that allowed Vance to refuse entry, a paperwork bypass for decommissioned structures, had been standard policy for years. No one designed the system to fail, but no one designed it to catch what Vance was doing either. The auditor who found the anomaly had been on the route for 3 weeks. The FBI surveillance operation had been running since the second week of January 2026, initiated on the narrower predicate of the power and tonnage anomalies before the missing persons connection was fully established. Thermal imaging drones flew the cooperative property on rotating overnight schedules, typically twice per week between midnight and 4 a.m. A stationary camera network was established on the county roads surrounding all 4 sides of the facility. Undercover vehicles maintained rotating observation during daytime business hours, covering both the facility entrance and the adjacent road network. By the end of the 4th week, the vehicle surveillance had produced a pattern. Deliveries to the cooperative's main loading dock followed a predictable commercial schedule. Seed suppliers, fuel trucks, chemical vendors, equipment service technicians. One vehicle didn't conform to any of those patterns. A white Ford Transit van, partial Iowa plate, registered through a shell company in Omaha, Nebraska, arrived at the facility every 9 to 11 days. Arrival time, always between midnight and 2 a.m. Parking position, always at the service entrance on the eastern face of Silo 6. Time on site, between 20 and 40 minutes. Departure, always before 3 a.m., taking the county road north rather than the main facility entrance route. Agents traced the van's registered entity back to a commercial property in Humboldt County, 17 miles north of the cooperative, a company called Garfield Transportation, LLC. One employee documented on record, Gary Holton, 52 years old, the night maintenance supervisor at Webster County Cooperative, the same man whose access credentials were current for every entry point in the facility. I reviewed the surveillance vehicle logs from this phase of the investigation, and one pattern kept pulling at me. On every night the transit van arrived at the cooperative, Vance's personal vehicle had already been parked on the property sometime within the preceding 2 hours. Not every night Vance stayed late. Only the nights the van came, Vance had been there first. The coordination was precise enough to be deliberate, loose enough to fall below any single database's automated pattern match algorithm. That kind of operational discipline doesn't develop casually. The FBI identified Holton as a co-primary target alongside Vance on February 11, 2026. The surveillance had also captured something else entirely. On the night of February 17, overnight thermal imaging documented a second vehicle approaching the facility, a dark-colored pickup truck with license plates obscured with caked mud, traveling a service road along the property's northern fence line. A road that appeared in no cooperative site documentation the FBI had on file. The vehicle was on site for 14 minutes. It did not approach Silo 6. It parked at the Eastern Equipment Barn, where thermal imaging registered a medium mass transfer from the truck bed to the barn structure, and departed using the same northern road. There were more people in this operation than the initial profile had calculated. 2 primary targets identified, a logistics pattern documented. The physical evidence pointed toward a sealed subgrade chamber containing people who had been reported missing from multiple states. The first attempt to get a federal warrant was declined. The initial application, filed February 24th, was rejected by a federal magistrate. The nexus between the documented anomalies and a specific federal crime was insufficient under the applicable standard. A power billing irregularity and mismatched tonnage records without direct evidence linking them to a criminal act did not clear the threshold. Agents revised and expanded the application. They incorporated the NCIC missing persons correlation. At that point, 3 confirmed entries with 2 more under analysis, along with the Holton Shell Company documentation, transaction records showing $47,000 in cash transfers through Garfield Transportation LLC over 6 months, and thermal imaging logs documenting human-scale heat signatures in Silo 6 on 5 separate overnight surveillance passes. The second application was filed March 10th. The warrant was granted March 16th. With the warrant in hand, the immediate pressure within the Omaha field office was to move. 3 months of surveillance, 3 missing persons files that had grown to 5 by the time the warrant cleared. Every day without action was another day of continued confinement for whoever was inside Silo 6. Brennan ordered a full tactical review before any approach. Here's what I think will get pushed back. That decision was correct, and the criticism fundamentally misunderstands the tactical situation. The subgrade chamber in Silo 6 had 1 documented access point, a welded steel bulkhead accessible only from inside the main silo structure, at the base of a 61-foot interior access shaft. Getting an entry team to that bulkhead required moving through 2 floors of active grain elevator equipment in total darkness, in a facility whose operator had 22 years of institutional knowledge of every circuit, every door, every maintenance protocol. A rushed entry, driven by urgency rather than preparation, creates a scenario where a single communication from anyone inside or adjacent to the facility changes the outcome inside that chamber in ways that cannot be corrected afterward. The warrant authorized the action. It did not mandate recklessness. During the pre-operational preparation period, financial analysis running parallel to the tactical review produced a 3rd member of the network. Bank records obtained under the warrant showed transfers from cooperative accounts into 2 recipients beyond Vance's personal account and Holton Shell Company. The second destination, accounts held by Robert Czarnik, 39 years old, listed in cooperative documentation as a contract agricultural consultant. Czarnik had no verifiable agricultural credentials on file with any Iowa professional licensing body. His documented services to the cooperative consisted of 14 invoices over 14 months, each billed for generic line items: logistics coordination, operational consulting, supply chain review. Total billed $63,000. Czarnik's financial profile extended further. 3 additional shell companies registered in Nebraska and South Dakota, accounts that had received transfers totaling approximately $375,000 over the same 14-month period. The origin of the majority of those funds was still under active forensic analysis when the raid was ordered on June 17th. 3 named targets: a financial network with roots in Nebraska and South Dakota, and the second vehicle, the dark pickup truck from the Northern Service Road, whose operator remained unidentified weeks after it was first documented. The truck traced to a motel registration in Webster City, 40 miles south of the cooperative. Agents established loose surveillance on the address. The vehicle cleared the property before an intercept warrant could be executed. The guest registered to the room checked out on March 21st. The name on the registration was later confirmed as false. This individual has not been publicly identified. He has not been charged. His role in the operation is described in court documents only as John Doe, co-conspirator, with a notation that the investigation into his identity remains ongoing. The most surprising thing about this case is not its scale, it's how ordinary the concealment was. No offshore accounts, no cryptocurrency, no layered holding companies requiring forensic accountants with security clearances to untangle. Personal checking accounts at regional banks. A shell company incorporated for $800 in filing fees. Invoices for services that could plausibly appear in any rural cooperative's accounts payable file. The entire financial architecture of a 7-month operation fit inside a standard commercial audit review if you knew what you were looking for. One detail in the financial exhibits stayed with me longer than any other. The consulting invoices Czarnik billed to the cooperative were for amounts between $4,500 and $4,900. Every invoice, 14 times over 14 months. The IRS threshold that triggers enhanced reporting on cash-adjacent transactions is $5,000. 14 invoices at amounts between $4,500 and $4,900. Not once at $5,000, not once at $4,400. The precision, always high, never over, is not coincidental. Someone in this operation understood exactly where the regulatory line was drawn. The FBI proceeded with the raid on June 18th. By that date, 5 women had been inside Silo 6 for anywhere from 61 to 87 days. What would you have done with Brennan's choice? Move earlier with less certainty and less tactical preparation, or hold for better intelligence at the cost of more time? Comment below. This is the operational decision federal law enforcement instructors are going to be analyzing in case studies for years. Reasonable people can land in different places on the same evidence. The entry team briefed on the evening of June 17 at a secured location west of Fort Dodge. Full review, the cooperative's floor plan, the interior layout of Silo 6's access shaft, the subgrade chamber configuration as documented in the facility's 1958 original construction records, and the specific tactical sequence for breaching a welded bulkhead in an enclosed subfloor space with limited egress options. The bulkhead would require a hydraulic spreader, a 4-agent tool. Estimated operating time based on the materials analysis of the original chamber construction documents, 25 to 35 seconds. That window, the noise exposure, was the single most operationally significant vulnerability in the plan. In a working agricultural facility with at least 2 co-conspirators holding current access credentials, 30 seconds of metalwork noise was a risk that could not be fully mitigated, only minimized. Weather forecast for the breach window on June 18th. Rainfall at 0.2 inches per hour, northeast wind at 14 miles per hour. Sufficient acoustic masking for the spreader operation, under the conditions modeled in the pre-raid assessment. Brennan set the breach for 0400 hours. If this investigation has held your attention through tonight, hit the like button, because what the entry team found behind that bulkhead is the part of this case that a federal prosecutor in court documents described as evidence of sustained, deliberate institutional concealment operating inside an active agricultural facility with complete community trust. At 0340 hours on June 18, the full perimeter was locked. Iowa State Patrol had sealed both county road access points to the facility. U.S. Marshals held outer positions on all 4 sides of the property. 3 FBI vehicles maintained staging positions on adjacent rural roads north and east. At 0405, the entry team moved from the command vehicle staging area into the standing corn on the cooperative's eastern boundary. At 0418, they reached the loading dock and began silent entry through a rear access door. The key impression for that door had been obtained 3 weeks prior through a separate, legally authorized inspection of the cooperative's Western grain processing facility, a routine inspection conducted under a different operational pretext, scheduled to avoid any indication that Silo 6 was the investigation's actual focus. The interior access shaft descended through 2 equipment floors before reaching the sealed bulkhead. 61 feet of total vertical travel in single-file formation, radio silence, red lens lights only. At 18 feet from the bulkhead, one agent's radio registered a signal, an automated check-in transmission. broadcast on a frequency not associated with any cooperative system in the FBI's documentation, not in the electrical schematics, not in the maintenance logs, not in anything Czarnik or Vance had filed with state agricultural or occupational safety regulators. The signal pinged twice in rapid succession, then stopped. Whether the transmission was triggered by the team's movement or was cycling on a preset timer, the tactical commander's after-action report states the question could not be determined at the time of entry. What was determinable? The signal had now gone silent when it was supposed to continue. If anyone outside the facility was monitoring it, they now had an anomaly, a gap where there should have been a ping. Estimated minimum response time from an external monitor who noticed the gap: 4 minutes. The team moved. The hydraulic spreader opened the welded bulkhead in 26 seconds. Behind it, a modified chamber, 18 by 22 feet, ceiling built from welded industrial grating and supplemental steel framing, bolted to the original subgrade walls. Generator-fed power, running off a separate circuit that tied into the cooperative's main panel through a junction box that appeared in no electrical documentation on file. Climate control, active. 12-volt battery-backed lighting on its own circuit, independently sustained. The space had been modified from the original chamber configuration. The work was not improvised. The ceiling framing was professionally installed. The climate system was a commercial unit. The generator hookup required someone with working knowledge of the facility's electrical infrastructure. 5 women were found inside. All 5 were alive. The trauma team at Mercy Medical Center in Fort Dodge began work at 0514 on June 18th. All 5 women were admitted under direct FBI protective security detail, with Iowa State Patrol units maintaining hospital perimeter access control through the following 72 hours. Their names have not been publicly released at the request of their families. Medical records pertaining to their condition are sealed under the court's protective order, incorporated into the indictment's supporting affidavit as Exhibit C. The FBI's on-record public statement, issued the morning of June 19th, confirmed 3 facts. All 5 women received immediate critical care upon admission, all 5 are in stable condition, and all 5 have been reunited with their families. The FBI did not elaborate on the nature of the care required. The indictment provides the clinical summary in a single sentence on page 7. Victims sustained conditions consistent with prolonged confinement in a restricted, subgrade environment. That sentence is the complete public clinical record for 5 people. It is, by design, all the language the document requires. 5 families received calls on the morning of June 18. The calls came from FBI victim coordinators, not from law enforcement command. The FBI does not publicize the content of those notifications. The indictment notes, as a matter of jurisdictional record, that all 5 women held United States citizenship or permanent residency status, and that at least 2 had been reported missing from addresses in the Des Moines metropolitan area. The duration of individual confinement, calculated from the missing persons filing dates, ran from 61 to 87 days. Those are the only numbers provided in any public document. Donald Vance was arrested at his home in Fort Dodge at 0532, 12 minutes after the entry team confirmed all 5 women were alive. He offered no resistance. He made no statement to arresting agents at any point during the initial processing. Gary Holton was arrested at the Humboldt County commercial property at 0541. He was awake when agents arrived. He was dressed. A prepaid cell phone sat on the kitchen counter. It had placed one outgoing call at 0428, 10 minutes after the entry team began the descent through Silo 6's interior access shaft. The call reached an unregistered number. That number traced to a prepaid device purchased at a Sioux City convenience store approximately 3 weeks before the raid. The device was recovered on June 24th in a drainage ditch outside Carroll, Iowa, on a county road consistent with a vehicle traveling southwest from Fort Dodge. Dead battery, no recoverable data, no fingerprints. The call duration, 11 seconds. Robert Czarnik was arrested at a hotel in Des Moines at 0607. Items seized from his room during the search: 4 prepaid phones, A laptop with a commercially encrypted partition confirmed on preliminary forensic review, and a manila folder of physical documents connecting him to the 3 Nebraska and South Dakota shell companies. Those companies' accounts are the subject of sealed subpoenas pending in federal district court in Omaha, Nebraska. The subpoenas are expected to surface in the coming weeks. All 3 were indicted on federal kidnapping, conspiracy, and forced labor charges on June 23, 2026. Pretrial detention without bail was ordered for all 3 at the initial appearance. Federal prosecutors are seeking sentence enhancements under statutes governing multi-victim extended duration confinement. Under the applicable mandatory minimum framework, Vance faces not less than 30 years on the kidnapping counts. Holton and Czarnik face sentence ranges dependent on cooperation levels and the outcome of the financial charges, which prosecutors have separately described as an ongoing and expanding matter. Webster County Cooperative is under federal receivership. Its accounts are frozen pending the full financial forensics review. 312 family farms in Webster, Hamilton, and Boone counties are operating under emergency procurement and storage arrangements with adjacent facilities for the current growing season. The cooperative's board of directors, 4 local farmers who had worked with Vance for years, issued a public statement on June 20th denying prior knowledge of his activities. A separate civil investigation by the Iowa Attorney General into board oversight obligations is running independently. Here is what the regulatory record shows, and it's worth saying directly. The decommissioned structures inspection bypass that Vance used is not an Iowa-specific policy anomaly. It is standard agricultural inspection protocol in most grain-producing states. It was designed for operational efficiency, requiring full physical entry into every decommissioned or non-operational structure at every facility during every annual audit cycle would demand resources no state agricultural bureau has. The policy is not unreasonable on its face. Vance knew the policy existed. He structured his operation around it. 3 men are in custody. The policy is unchanged. Whatever comes next in this case in terms of regulatory response, and the Iowa Department of Agriculture has not committed publicly to any protocol revision, will be determined by people who are not currently required to move quickly. We'll say what most won't. The state agricultural inspection system that cleared this facility annually for 6 years did not fail through negligence by any individual inspector.